Good day, and welcome back to the Sussex Files, the channel where we follow the evidence, name the pattern, and refuse to dress it up in polite language. If you have been with us since episode 1, you already know two things. You know that Harry was a psychologically vulnerable man who was expertly read and strategically approached. And you know that Meghan Markle arrived in his life not as a passenger, but as a pilot with a flight plan already filed. Today we get to the engine that has been powering the entire Sussex operation since the moment they landed in California. And that engine has one fuel source: suffering. This is episode 3 of the Sussex Files. We are calling it the victim economy. And what we are about to lay out is the most damning analysis of the Sussex brand that you will find anywhere, because we are not going to talk about whether their pain is real or imagined. We are going to talk about something far more uncomfortable. We are going to talk about what happens when suffering stops being something you recover from and starts being something you sell. Before we get into it, if you are new here, welcome to the Sussex Files. We do not do rumors. We do not do speculation. We open the file, we read the evidence, and we tell you what it says. We are trying to reach 500 subscribers in 2 weeks, and we are getting close. If this kind of content is what you have been looking for, subscribe right now and hit the notification bell, because episode 4 is going to expose something about Prince William and the royal impasse that the palace insiders have never said this plainly in public. Subscribe. Click the bell. Now let us get into it.
Harry's lack of productivity, I think, is probably at the root of why. I mean, it is now being reported almost as a fact that Netflix will not renew their contract when it ends next year. $100 million being described by experts there in a well-known podcast as one of the worst deals in Hollywood history. $100 million. Didn't get much out of it. And Meghan has recorded a cooking series that Netflix bosses apparently do not expect to use their term, connect. In other words, they're not excited about this. And they don't think that Harry's Polo series, which as far as I know, he hasn't even filmed a single second of, they don't think that will connect either. And you know why that is, Kinsey? It's because no one cares about chinless wonders falling off horses. So anyway, but the Netflix deal, it looks like it's in big trouble.
Yeah, this is according to Matthew Bellini. He's the Puck co-founder and former editor of The Hollywood Reporter. Puck is I believe it's the new newsletter that he does. And again, one of the worst deals in entertainment history is what they're calling this. Harry and Meghan featured on a long list of underperformers in Hollywood's hyperinflated peak streaming era. And I think underperformers is a really good way to describe this, but they talked about those 9-figure packs that led to 0 new shows.
Here is the foundation of everything we are about to discuss. There is a well-documented psychological and commercial phenomenon that researchers and media analysts call the victim economy. It is not a conspiracy theory. It is an observable pattern in which public figures, particularly those with access to large media platforms, discover that framing their life story as one of persecution, injustice, and survival generates more attention, more sympathy, more commercial opportunity, and more power than any other narrative available to them. The victim economy rewards escalation. It rewards detail. It rewards tears on camera. And crucially, it punishes resolution. Because the moment the suffering ends, the story ends. And the moment the story ends, so does the revenue. Now apply that framework to Harry and Meghan, and watch everything snap into focus. When the couple sat down with Oprah Winfrey in March 2021, it was presented to the world as a reluctant disclosure. 2 wounded people who had been failed by an institution, finally telling their truth. The language was careful, the setting was cinematic, and the emotional beats were perfectly constructed. Meghan discussed her mental health struggles. She spoke about suicidal thoughts. She alleged racism within the palace walls. Harry spoke about feeling trapped, cut off financially, abandoned by his family. It was, on every technical level, a masterclass in sympathetic storytelling. But here is what the mainstream media almost universally failed to ask. Why a global primetime television broadcast? If the goal was to process pain privately, there are therapists, clergy, trusted friends, and private journals. If the goal was to address the royal family directly, there are lawyers, mediators, and private communications. A primetime CBS broadcast reaching 49 million viewers globally is not a therapeutic exercise. It is a product launch, and the product being launched was the Sussex victim narrative, packaged, polished, and ready for commercial distribution. The numbers confirm this beyond any reasonable argument. The Oprah interview was followed within months by a Spotify podcast deal reportedly worth £18 million. The Netflix documentary deal was reportedly worth up to $100 million. The memoir Spare, in which Harry detailed intimate and damaging revelations about his family, was reported to have earned him a $20 million advance. Every single one of these commercial ventures was built entirely on the foundation of the victim narrative established in the Oprah interview. Remove the suffering, remove the allegations, remove the sense of persecution, and you have nothing to sell. A happily integrated prince and his successful actress wife living quietly in California is a human interest story worth precisely nothing in the marketplace. But a prince who was trapped, whose wife was driven to the edge by institutional racism, who had to fight his way to freedom, that is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The suffering was not incidental to the business model. The suffering was the business model. And here is where it gets truly damning. The victim economy, as we said, requires escalation. Because empathy is a finite resource. The same story told the same way generates diminishing returns over time. This is not a cynical observation. It is basic human psychology and basic media economics. The Oprah interview shocked the world in 2021. The Netflix documentary in 2022 needed to go further to produce the same emotional impact. The memoir in January 2023 needed to go further still. And at each stage, the escalation required fresh damage to relationships, fresh revelations, and a fresh supply of grievance to process publicly. British public sympathy data makes this pattern unmistakable. In the period immediately following the announcement of Megxit in January 2020, polling showed a degree of public sympathy for the couple, particularly in the context of press intrusion and the challenges of royal life. By 2021, following the Oprah interview, that sympathy had begun to divide sharply. By the time the Netflix documentary aired in late 2022, YouGov polling showed Meghan's approval rating in Britain had dropped to its lowest recorded level, with negative ratings of over 65%. By early 2023, following the publication of Spare, Prince Harry's own approval rating in Britain had fallen below 25% favorably. The trajectory is a nearly perfect inverse correlation. As the volume of public complaints increased, public sympathy decreased in almost exact proportion. The more they sold the victim narrative, the less the audience believed it. And they kept escalating anyway. Why? Because by that point, the victim economy had a momentum of its own. The Netflix deal required content. The content required narrative. The narrative required grievance. They were not just selling suffering to the public. They were contractually obligated to keep producing it. A streaming platform does not write a 9-figure check for a couple to sit quietly and heal. It writes that check for documented, ongoing, dramatic conflict with one of the most famous institutions on earth. The royal family was not just Harry and Meghan's estranged relatives. By this point, the royal family had become their content. Now let us be precise about something, because this is the point at which critics of this analysis always push back. Nobody is saying Harry and Meghan did not experience genuine difficulty. Nobody is saying that the pressures of royal life are not real, that media intrusion is not damaging, or that institutional racism does not exist. These things can all be true. What we are examining is not the reality of their experiences. What we are examining is the decision to commercialize those experiences on a global scale, repeatedly, with escalating detail, in ways that caused maximum damage to the people around them, and then to market that damage as courage. Because courage, in the Sussex economy, is a product too. Every interview, every disclosure, every tear on camera was framed not as commerce, which it was, but as bravery. The brave woman speaking her truth. The brave man breaking the cycle. The brave couple choosing love over duty. The framing of commercial activity as moral heroism is one of the most sophisticated elements of the entire operation, and it served a crucial function. It made criticism of the content almost impossible, because any pushback could be reframed as attacking the bravery of vulnerable people rather than scrutinizing the commercial decisions of two extremely wealthy public figures with major media deals. Royal commentator Kinsey Schofield, who we referenced in episode 1, identified this dynamic directly when she noted that the empathy fatigue surrounding the Sussexes set in as soon as the public recognized the pattern. People are not unsympathetic to suffering. They are unsympathetic to suffering that appears curated, scheduled, and priced. And the British public, who have a particular sharpness when it comes to detecting performance dressed as authenticity, recognize the pattern earlier and more decisively than almost any other audience on Earth. There is one final dimension of the victim economy that nobody discusses, and it may be the most consequential of all. The victim economy not only rewards the performance of suffering, it actively punishes resolution. Because if Harry reconciled with his family, if Meghan acknowledged complexity in her royal experience, if they both expressed gratitude for the platform the institution gave them, the entire commercial architecture collapses. The Netflix deal loses its dramatic engine. The memoir loses its emotional core. The podcast loses its through line. The identity loses its structure. They cannot afford to heal publicly, even if they have healed privately, because healing is financially catastrophic for the brand they have built. They are, in the most literal commercial sense, trapped by their own victim narrative. The Spare did not escape the institution. He built a new one and locked himself inside it. In episode 4, we turn to the most underreported relationship in this entire story. Not Harry and Meghan. Not Harry and Charles. The relationship that holds every card in the Sussex saga, Harry and William. Insiders describe a deeply rooted impasse, with William feeling that welcoming Meghan back requires swallowing something he is simply not willing to swallow. That episode is going to lay out exactly what that something is. If you enjoyed today's episode, hit the like button. It costs you nothing, and it helps this channel more than you know. Subscribe if you have not already, click the notification bell, and we will see you in episode 4. Thank you for watching the Sussex Files. The case continues.